Step back in time to the year 1907, a world before engines, before computers, where only pure human imagination ruled the board. You are about to witness a masterpiece so perfect. It is known simply as the Immortal game, the sacrifices, the precision, and a finishing move that defies logic. This is Akiba Rubinstein at his peak. Let us begin. The game we're looking at is one of the most famous ever played, Gersz Rotlewi against Akiba Rubinstein. This is a historical chess masterpiece, and the reason people still study it today is simple. The attack is beautiful, but the mistakes that allowed it are also very human. So let's go through it carefully, move by move. White begins with pawn to d4, and black replies with pawn to d5. White develops the knight to f3. Black plays e6, supporting the center. White goes e3, choosing a solid setup, and black strikes with c5, immediately challenging the middle. White answers with c4, and black develops the knight to c6. White brings the other knight to c3, and black develops the knight to f6. So now we have the Tarrasch Defense symmetrical variation. From an opening theory perspective, white is building a stable center and looking for queenside space, while black is aiming for active piece play and central pressure. White captures on c5, taking the pawn, and black recaptures with bishop takes c5. White plays a3, a useful waiting move that prepares queenside expansion, and black answers with a6. White pushes b4, gaining space and hitting the bishop, and black calmly retreats the bishop to d6. White develops the bishop to b2, placing it on the long diagonal. Black castles kingside. White now plays queen to d2, and black responds with queen to e7. So far, everything looks very normal. Now comes the first critical moment. White plays bishop to d3. This move looks completely natural. You're developing a piece, eyeing the kingside and getting ready to complete development. But educationally, this is white's first inaccuracy. White could have clarified the center first. Instead, this move allows black to seize the initiative with tempo. Rubinstein immediately captures on c4 with the d-pawn. White recaptures with bishop takes c4. Black then plays b5, hitting the bishop and gaining time. White retreats the bishop back to d3, and black places the rook on d8. That rook move is very important. Black is not rushing. He is just improving piece placement and taking control of the open file. White steps aside with queen to e2, and black develops the bishop to b7. That bishop on b7 is going to become one of the most dangerous pieces on the board. White castles kingside, and black centralizes with knight to e5. White exchanges with knight takes e5, and black recaptures with bishop takes e5. Now black's bishop is beautifully placed in the center, and all of black's pieces are starting to coordinate. Here comes the second critical moment. White plays f4. Again, this is a very human move. White wants to gain space and challenge the active bishop, but this is another inaccuracy. The move looks energetic, but it weakens the king. The dark squares around white's king become softer, and that matters because black's pieces are already aiming in that direction. Rubinstein calmly retreats the bishop to c7. White continues with e4, grabbing more space in the center, and black brings the other rook into play with rook to c8. At this point, black's setup is extremely harmonious. One rook is on the open d-file, the other rook is active on c8. The bishop on b7 is powerful, and white's king is starting to lose some protection. Now, we reach the move that changed everything. White pushes e5. This is the third and biggest turning point so far. It looks aggressive. White is trying to gain space and push black back, but in reality, this is too optimistic. White needed consolidation here, not another pawn thrust. By pushing e5, white opens lines and gives black exactly the attacking chances he wants. Rubinstein reacts immediately with bishop to b6. Check. Beautiful move. The bishop swings onto the diagonal and drives the king into the corner. White has to play king to h1. Black jumps in with knight to g4. Now the pressure is real. The knight joins the attack, the bishop is cutting across the board, and the queen is ready to come in. White tries bishop to e4. This is actually a very understandable defensive move. White blocks the diagonal and tries to hold the kingside together. But Rubinstein now plays queen to h4, and now black's idea is clear. The queen, bishop, and knight are all aiming at h2. White responds with g3. This is the fourth critical moment. Once again, the move makes human sense. White wants to attack the queen and create breathing room for the king, but this move weakens the dark squares even more. A tougher practical defense was h3. The move played in the game gives black exactly the attacking hook he needs. And now comes the immortal idea. Black plays rook takes c3. What a move! Rubinstein throws the rook into white's position and completely ignores the fact that his queen on h4 is hanging. This is not random sacrifice chess. This works because every black piece is perfectly placed. White now takes the queen with pawn takes h4. And let's be honest, over the board, almost anyone would want to take that queen. But this is the fifth and final critical moment. Taking the queen is understandable, but it loses by force. White needed counterplay, not material. Rubinstein continues with rook to d2, an incredible follow-up. Now the second rook enters the attack. White captures it with queen takes d2, again a natural move. White is trying to remove black's attacking pieces one by one, but Rubinstein has seen further. Black now plays bishop takes e4, check. That bishop from b7 removes the defender on e4. Opens the line toward the king with perfect timing. White blocks with queen to g2, then black plays rook to h3. This is the final rook lift. The rook swings across the board, and right here, Gersz Rotlewi resigns the game. He resigns because black has an unstoppable checkmate. Let's look at exactly how this checkmate would happen on the board as an example, so you can see why white had to give up. If white tries rook to f3 as a last defensive attempt, desperately trying to block the attack, Rubinstein removes it immediately with bishop takes f3. White recaptures with queen takes f3, and now, the finish, black plays rook takes h2 checkmate. What a breathtaking concept. Rubinstein sacrificed the queen, he sacrificed one rook, then he sacrificed the second rook. And because of all that calculation, the final rook lands on h2 and ends the game. That is why this game is remembered as Rubinstein's Immortal, and the educational value here is enormous. First, not every bad decision looks bad when you make it. Bishop to d3, f4, e5, g3, and finally taking the queen, all of these moves are understandable from a human point of view. That is exactly why this game is so useful to study. Second, king's safety is not just about castling. White castled successfully, but then gradually weakened the king with pawn moves, once the king's cover was damaged. Black's active pieces became far more important than material. Third, great combinations usually come from great preparation. Rubinstein didn't just suddenly invent magic. He improved the rook on d8, developed the bishop to b7, activated the rook on c8, centralized the bishop, and only then launched the tactical sequence. And finally, this game teaches one of the most important lessons in chess improvement. When your opponent's pieces are perfectly coordinated around your king, grabbing material can be the most dangerous move on the board. That is Rotlewi against Rubinstein. Lodz 1907, one of the greatest historical chess games ever played. If you enjoyed this chess game analysis, let me know which moment impressed you most. Bishop to b6 check, rook takes c3, or the final checkmate calculation. Subscribe for more classic chess masterpieces explained move by move, and I'll see you in the next one.